Hey guys, welcome to another video. Today I'm actually going to be talking about a full season of television. This is basically going to be my review for Ted Season 2, which is available on Peacock right now to stream. I know I don't do a lot of TV shows as often as I once did, but for Ted Season 2 and even for Ted Season 1 back when that came out, I did do a full review of that first season for those who want to check it out. I'm sure it's somewhere on my channel here if you want to just search for it specifically on YouTube. I'm sure you'll be able to find it. But I am going to be talking about Ted Season 2 today. I'm also going to be talking about it as non-spoilery as I can. So if you have not seen the full new season of Ted yet on Peacock, this is, like I said, Season 2 of the show. Don't worry, I am going to try to be as non-specific as I can on certain things, but I'm also going to try to tiptoe around certain things so I can still talk about them without spoiling it. So I'll do my best not to spoil anything. I could always do like a spoil segment at the end if I have to, but I'm going to try to avoid doing that. But for Ted Season 2, you guys, basically we do follow John Bennett again, just like we did in Season 1. Him and Ted are actually in senior year this time for high school for the storyline. One thing that is kind of not as great for Season 2 is they did more kind of like what Family Guy does, where they'll do an episode, they'll kind of restart over again, and then they'll do another episode and kind of start the cycle over again. And so basically, a lot of the things they do throughout the show this time are a little inconsequential. But basically, for the most part, kind of like Season 1, we do follow John Bennett when he's in high school before Mark Wahlberg eventually plays the character in the Ted films. And we kind of follow what happens during John's senior year and kind of the things that his parents are up to and what he's up to. And we do kind of follow a little bit, not very much because it's near the end of the season, but we do follow a little bit of kind of what he's up to once high school is finished and things like that. And that basically is kind of the main focus of Ted Season 2 this time around. But overall, guys, I really enjoyed this season. I will say right off the bat, I do think Season 1 is the overall better season of these two seasons of television. Though I think they're both great, I really like the overall Ted franchise, whether it is the films or the TV show. I think they work both great in their mediums. I think Seth MacFarlane has a really fun time bringing these characters to life, and it is always fun kind of seeing these characters, whether it is on film or in television, getting into trouble, getting into these kind of scenarios once again. So I'm going to go over some positives and negatives as to what I liked about the season, but some things about it that I think could have been better as well. First and foremost, guys, this is consistently funny. It is one of those shows, once again, similar to Season 1, where it does consistently make you laugh. It is consistently funny. Even if it's a scenario that you're not completely on board for, I feel like the show does a great job of making you feel invested, making you feel entertained, making sure you're having a good time and that you're laughing along with these characters. Seth MacFarlane, I think, is very good about exploring different kind of subject matters. So, like, if you don't like Dungeons and Dragons, the next episode is going to be about something completely different. Just like how the following episode is going to be about something completely different again. And I feel like he's always good about that, whether it is Family Guy or American Dad or any kind of series or movies or shows that he's worked on over the years. I do feel like he's good about exploring different types of things. So like I said, if you're really not invested in one kind of subject matter, he does explore something else that you might be more interested in on a later episode. So I think he is good about finding those kind of source materials and subject matters for his episodes and for things that he likes to parody in his shows that he's pursuing. It is also great to see these main characters again. It is fun to see, John Bennett and the parents and this cousin that's staying with them and any kind of friends or bullies or other people that show up within Ted and John's school. We do get to see, I think, some of them had like brief appearances this time around that are kind of returning characters from the first season. So some of them are, coming back for what they were doing so well in Season 1. And so it was great to see some of those characters again. And for the most part, like I said, this is a fun show to watch. So like I said, even if you're not into like Dungeons and Dragons or know a lot about like the O.J. Simpson case or a lot about what was going on with Bill Clinton in the 90s, I do feel like the show does a great job of kind of making it fun to watch, whether you're someone that's really, really young, someone that's really, really old, someone that might not have, maybe you've only heard about Bill Clinton in, history class and stuff like that. I think the show is good about finding stuff that's fun to watch and making the show consistently entertaining and making sure you're having a good time watching the new season. And like I said before, there is some great 90s nostalgia with the show because the show does take place during the 90s. So they do kind of go over, stuff going on with Bill Clinton, stuff going on with O.J. Simpson, the launch of the internet, Jurassic Park. I think the movie Friday was brought up at one point in this TV show. Just stuff that happened in the 90s, stuff that was released in the 90s, stuff that was kind of cool in the 90s, things that people were catching on to or things that they were doing. Like there's moments where like a character rents some videotapes from Blockbuster and stuff like that. So the show does have a lot of fun with some of that 90s nostalgia. And so I always like how Seth MacFarlane is able to kind of, for people like me that did grow up in the 90s, is able to kind of find some stuff that people who were from the 90s can relate to as far as important figures and stuff like that. And one thing I did admire about the show this time too is it does try to tie into the Ted films because it is rumored that if Ted does continue, it's going to be possibly as an animated series or as a Ted 3 movie. So there's no confirmation that if we even do get a season 3 of the show or not. But I do like how this second season is kind of tying into those Ted films as far as where we eventually do find John Bennett when he is an adult and stuff like that. So I do like how they do tie into, and they also they do something with the narrative at the very, very last episode that I thought was very, very clever too. So for those who are wondering, because this is a prequel show, this film is kind of leaning more into tying into those Ted films. And if we don't get a season 3, obviously that the next step for those who want to kind of watch the whole timeline in full, this will lead your way into going back into those Ted films now too. But it does sound like we might potentially get an animated series. So that's kind of what I've been hearing that might be the continuation of the Ted franchise. But for my negatives for this new season, though, I do feel overall this isn't quite as impactful as season 1 was. I do feel like season 1 had better concepts to explore. I do like how it was an overall story that you kind of had to follow. You kind of did have to watch it from the very first episode into the last one, and each episode kind of tied into each other in a certain way. I feel like season 2 doesn't really do that as much. It's kind of more of the Family Guy approach where we're given a scenario. Every episode that the cycle kind of restarts. So anything that happened to the dad, anything that happened to the mom, anything that happened to the cousin, or anything that happened to John or Ted kind of restarts, recycles, and kind of starts on a new page by the time those new episodes start up. So it is kind of one negative of the show that I didn't like this time around, is it did feel a little bit more sitcom-y and more scenario-based. And it is one of those things where by the time that episode does end, they go and they move on to another subject matter of some kind by the next episode. So it doesn't quite feel as impactful as a result. That's one thing I think season 1 got a little bit better for the show than this new season did. But overall, this is a very fun season. It's just not quite as impactful as that first season was. And I also thought some of the returning characters that we did get from season 1, whether it's, the babysitter guy from season 1 or the bully from season 1 or this guy who had to pretend to be this other guy's father in this one episode. He briefly returns for this one episode in this season. I just felt like some of their returns were just not quite as fun this time around. It just felt a little lame. It just kind of felt like they were available for one day of filming and then they just kind of showed up for a couple seconds and then that was it. So I thought some of the returning characters, though it was great to see them for some of them, specifically some of the more guest-related characters, it just didn't quite feel as impactful once again. I want to bring that word up again. It just doesn't quite feel as impactful with that the way season 1 chose to do it. And I think I already brought this up, but this season really does feel more scenario-driven than story-driven. The Ted films have never been known for, getting into super deep stories or anything like that, but it really does feel a little more scenario-driven this time around than story-driven. So that is one aspect of the show I thought was a little disappointing. And overall, too, there were a couple of jokes that did feel kind of flat. There was just a couple of scenes where you can tell they were trying to be super funny about something, and it just kind of fell flat on its face. And it doesn't happen a lot, thankfully, because I do feel there's more good laughs than bad laughs in this season. But there is the occasional flat joke where it's just like you kind of roll your eyes and be like, okay, Mr. MacFarlane, I think you could have done a little bit better there. And like I was kind of alluding to earlier, it does sound like they aren't really going to go for a season 3 just because of how costly the show is. But I have heard rumors of a potential animated spinoff to this, so I don't know if it's just season 3 in animated form or just things that Ted was up to before the films officially started, because they kind of have a gray area there that they could explore if they choose to. Um, yeah, I would really like a season 3 if we could possibly get one, or even a Ted 3 film if we could possibly get one of those. I feel like Ted should end here. I really feel like we should do something additional with it. But like I said, have heard whispers of a potentially animated series, so I don't want it to just become another Family Guy or another American Dad. I really do hope it kind of finds its own identity. Hopefully, if they choose to go that route with this, um, I would really like a season 3. But from what I've been hearing, it sounds like they aren't going that direction, unfortunately. But for Ted season 2, as far as overall this season is concerned, I'm going to give it an 8.5 out of 10. Really good season. Like I said, a couple negatives along the way. I do feel like season 1 was the overall better season overall. But overall, pretty fun. If you really like that first season, I think you're going to have a lot of fun with this season as well, even if it's not quite as impactful as that first season was. 8.5 out of 10 for me, though. Really enjoyed it. So if you like the Ted franchise, if you like season 1 of Ted, I think you're going to have a fun time with season 2 as well.